My husband moved his brother's family into my beach house without my permission. I changed the locks while they were out. I inherited a small beach house from my grandmother when she passed away 6 years ago. It was the only thing of value she had, and she left it specifically to me because I was the one who visited her every summer growing up. That house meant everything to me. I kept it exactly the way she decorated it. I spent my own money on repairs and maintenance. My husband Troy had no claim to it because I inherited it before we got married, and I kept it in my name only. We used it for weekend getaways a few times a year, and I loved every moment there. Troy's brother Mitch has always been bad with money. He's been fired from multiple jobs, made terrible investments, and somehow always ended up needing help. Troy felt guilty because he was the successful brother, so he'd lend Mitch money constantly. I told Troy to stop enabling him, but he said that was just what brothers did. 3 months ago, Mitch lost his apartment because he couldn't pay rent. He had a wife and 2 kids and nowhere to go. Troy came to me and asked if they could stay at the beach house for a few weeks while they figured things out. I said no. I explained that house was special to me and I didn't want anyone living there long term. I said they could stay with us temporarily, or Troy could help them find a rental. Troy said I was being heartless and his brother needed help. I said there were other ways to help that didn't involve my grandmother's house. I thought that was the end of the discussion. 2 weeks later, I was going through our shared bank account and noticed Troy had withdrawn $500. When I asked about it, he got nervous and said it was for groceries. We don't spend $500 on groceries. I drove to the beach house that weekend without telling Troy. I wanted to check on the property since I hadn't been there in a few months. When I pulled up, there were toys scattered across the front lawn. There was a strange car in the driveway. The curtains my grandmother picked out had been replaced with cheap plastic blinds. I walked inside and found Mitch's wife Candace sitting on my grandmother's couch watching television. She looked up and asked what I was doing there. I asked her the same thing. She said Troy told them they could stay as long as they needed. She said they'd been there for almost 3 weeks already. I looked around the house. My grandmother's antique dishes were in a pile in the sink, some of them chipped. There were crayon marks on the walls. The guest bedroom had been turned into a playroom with my grandmother's furniture shoved into a corner. Someone had spilled something on the vintage rug in the living room and just left it there. I called Troy immediately. He admitted everything. He said he moved them in after I said no because he figured I'd never find out. He said they needed help more than I needed an empty house sitting there unused. He said I was being selfish about a property I only visited a few times a year. I hung up on him and told Candace they had 1 week to leave. She called Mitch, who called Troy, who called me begging me to reconsider. I said no. Candace told me I was cruel for putting children on the street. I told her I wasn't the one who couldn't pay rent. The week passed and they didn't leave. Troy said they just needed a little more time to find something. I said the week was up. He said I was being unreasonable. I drove back to the beach house on day 8. They weren't home. The kids were at school and Mitch and Candace were out somewhere. I called a locksmith and had every lock changed within 2 hours. I packed up all their belongings and left everything on the front porch. I took photos of all the damage they'd caused and made a list of everything that needed to be repaired or replaced. Then I drove home and waited. Mitch called screaming that night saying they were locked out. I told him the week I gave them was over. He said they had nowhere to go. I said that wasn't my problem anymore. Candace called Troy crying and Troy came home furious. He asked how I could do this to his family. I told him he was the one who did this by lying to me and letting people into my property without permission. I told him the damage they caused was coming out of his personal savings. He said I couldn't make him pay for that. I showed him the photos and the list and said he could pay me back, or he could find his own place to live too. Troy paid for the repairs. It took almost $2,000 to fix everything, including replacing my grandmother's dishes that couldn't be saved. Mitch and his family ended up staying with Troy's parents for 3 months until they found an apartment. Candace still won't speak to me. Mitch tells everyone I'm heartless. Troy and I went to marriage counseling because I couldn't trust him anymore. We're still working on it, but things aren't the same. He knows now that the beach house is mine and nobody stays there without my explicit permission. I visit more often now just to make sure. The new locks work perfectly. My grandmother's house is back to the way she kept it. Some of the damage couldn't be fully undone, but I did my best. Troy says I overreacted. I say he's lucky I didn't make him leave with his brother.